All right, everybody. We are live for the 1024 OMI All Hands, and there is a lot of fun, exciting movement that we are here to report on. We've got roll call here as far as people who are in and on stage: Leighton Explorer, Fear and Works, Vladimandik, Cheesy Lasagna, and Wolfgang, as well as myself. So that is a roll call. We are ready to get started with the agenda. Quick general OMI update. We are continuing to integrate into the Linux Foundation's AI and data group. We have a website and rebranding underway. We've already given the kind of a first set of feedback to the Linux Foundation team on that, but we should get a website up and running here in the next week or two with more information around the projects that we're taking on and the organization as a whole. Our both our machine learning working group and data pipeline working group are making some really cool progress. We have an active application out to AWS for their open source kind of credits program. Well, they'll give credits for at least for now the data working group application. We are still in active search for compute partners for the model side of things for training. However, we're not blocked on the early testing for that, as Wolfgang has been able to do a lot of tests with his local compute, and in probably short order here, some compute that Invoke will be sponsoring and providing to kind of do the initial testing and evaluation of the training code. But there are some really cool results there. Leighton Explorer has some updates on his research, which could potentially change the landscape forever, but also provide a very interesting path to training the model. And then I'll let the data team talk about what they're working on. I don't think there's been any other movement on standards. I think with the release of SD 3.5, we have yet another model that we need to start evaluating standards for, and so I'm still optimistic that we can figure that out in some amount of time. But for the time being, let's go ahead and shift over to the ML working group to give some updates. First person that I'll ask to give updates is maybe Wolfgang, since you've done some of the training code, and then we'll pass it to Leighton Explorer.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a good base code now that's training. We've trained it with a few different single concept data sets. Most of the training has alternated between just testing the flow of the data through the pipeline, confirming that we can actually start generating something that looks like the single concept data sets. Like Kent said, that was done locally, but I've also used some compute credits I've got for multi GPU testing. I've got the data parallelism set up. Right now, I'm working on model parallelism. Once I figure out the model parallelism, I'll start using the Invoke data set or Invoke resources rather to do a larger train. So the models that I've trained, even on the multi GPUs, have been around 0.3 billion parameters, so 30 million to 50 million parameters. Um, pretty small still, but that's to be expected because I've been using consumer GPUs, and I think the most I've had so far is 5. So, um, the base code's there though. It's looking good. It's just now a matter of making sure we can efficiently divide it amongst the GPUs, the data, and the model both. So, very exciting. Very close to having something that we can actually scale up to a billion or 2 billion or 3 billion parameters to test the training with.
Awesome. And I know that you had shared out some pictures with the machine learning working group. It's fuzzy, it's blurry, but you can see that it's learning, and that's like the most valuable thing is it's making progress. So appreciate the work you're putting in on that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm hoping to once I get the parallelism worked out, I'm hoping to release a quick doc. It'll be more of like a slide deck, just kind of showing the simplified concepts that we're doing, including the data flow, the parameter size, the architecture, and then some of the early results. So hang on for that. I'll make sure to post it so everybody has access to that.
And will we be updating the code in the GitHub training pipeline with updates, or is that kind of pending further testing?
I'm making sure the code runs well. So I have like a staging Git almost, if you will. I'll update that in the next couple of days, though, for sure.
Awesome. Very cool. Leighton Explorer, you're up. You get to share your exciting updates.
Yeah, so I've been working on several different architectures for the VAE, essentially. Um, One of them's not really a VAE, it's more built on top of the recent paper on the deep compression autoencoders. Um, Essentially, most of my experiments have been combining that paper with another popular paper, the image neural field diffusion models, to add the resolution agnostic capabilities to the deep autoencoder, such that essentially we can take in an image of a certain size, produce a latent, then produce a feature map from that latent, but also then render that feature map at different resolutions. So even though the latent might be a certain size, we might be able to actually render 4x what the feature map is. So it's been pretty promising. There's been some slight issues with like numerical stability as we make the network deeper. So things like vanishing gradients and such that we're working out, but I think it'll get fixed in due time.
Very, very cool. And just for people who are maybe not as familiar with the implications of that, can you share some of what you think that would do for the model as far as efficiency and compression?
Yeah. So essentially, we would be able to run uh, these diffusion models on much lower end devices. They would use much less memory, things like that, because with the deep autoencoder, you're able to actually compress spatially a lot higher resolution or a factor. So you're thinking like 64x or 128x spatial compression. This means that the diffusion model itself has less data to deal with and less data to work with, meaning it will be faster for inferencing on lower end devices.
Very cool. All right. I think that concludes ML working group updates. We'll move into the data working group. I know that there's a lot going on there, although maybe there's some questions here. Is this the same idea that Santa uses? That seems like quite promising. Very happy to see this as it may speed up both training as well as inference. I don't know if you've looked at the Santa paper, Leighton Explorer, to know whether that's similar or not.
I have not, so I can't really answer that question.
Cool. Well, we'll post out the Santa paper just so people can look at it. Definitely does have some overlap, but I don't believe it's the same. And there's the Santa NV Labs link as well. Cool. I guess data working group, Fearnworks, do you want to go ahead and take it up since you've got that report? I can certainly read it for you, but I figure you're probably the one who wants to give the updates.
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead. So we've been focused primarily on three major areas in the data working group, and that is collecting the data for the HDR VAE in that data set, getting the initial infrastructure up and going, and the caption service. So going down from there, inside of the report, I did post out the HDR data sets that we're gathering. And a lot of this is us going and manually gathering stuff, using the pipeline that Vlad contributed for generating HDR with SDXL, and kind of gathering. I think we have a few that were from Blender. So basically trying to generate a bunch of, figure out how we can generate some of these resources that are hard to get from the internet itself. This is slightly impeded because we are waiting on the infrastructure to do the upload kind of in our end state that we want to do, where we're posting it publicly so other people can upload. But we're trying to at least, be impeded but not blocked. on this aspect, and we have seems like over 10K images in various stages of inside of a data set right now. So a lot of the team has been working on that heavily. I don't know, Cheesy, do you want to talk any more about that? You know more about this side of things.
Yeah, you covered it pretty well, but yeah, there's just a split between photographic work. Some of that is HDR data fully, like .dng files from our phones and stuff. Some of that is just additional high quality raw data from other camera sources. But then there's also, like you said, we're working on experiments with Blender and a small experiment with Unreal Engine, just seeing if we can get those to generate additional HDR data so we can get some more data that's not photographic, just to kind of round out that data set in different ways. And it's still an ongoing process, and we still obviously want to get to the point where we can start collecting community contributions there once our infrastructure and everything's in place. It'll help round that out a lot better too, I think.
Yeah.
As far, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
As far as the infrastructure elements, we did kind of talk through what our process is for getting into AWS. We did add a DevSecOps engineer to help us clear out some compliance stuff, which should be helpful for getting funding and being having the pedigree so that we can get free stuff. Essentially, I think would be the best way to put it. And then over on the captioning side, I did put a post out there to a cookbook. This is what we've kind of working past month or so, evaluating different methods of doing the captioning. And recently, Outlines has implemented the captioning or the ability to do guided decoding for vision models, which is essentially establishing a finite state machine at decoding time to force it into a structured output. There hasn't been a lot of stuff in this area for vision up to this point, so it's really just starting to come out. So we kind of latched onto that and had some really good results from it. So the initial put out there is on that cookbook. The main focus that we're really happy with was that we were able to force it to generate, all the different styles of tags. So we could say, generate an aesthetic tag, a style tag, a subject tag, and use that initial sort of clip tag generation to actually ground some of the dense captioning stuff that's later on. There's still a little bit more that needs to be done there, but it's very promising from the get-go, and obviously has the benefit of giving us the three types of captions that we want, which is the token tags, the short caption, and then the dense caption. And so yeah, so you can see some examples of that in there. And some of the next things that we'll be doing is kind of working with some of the sampling parameters that they have available in Outlines. It doesn't cover everything we need, so we're probably going to write a few wrappers just to make sure that we can do a little bit more there. But yeah, we also did some reviews over all the current vision models and kind of what handles this sort of chain of thought grounding caption chain the best. Looking at things like Aria, Pixtral, Quinn, Moondream. We did find that Quinn and Moondream seemed to kind of fall apart once it was asked to do the reasoning. So it seemed like that didn't go so well. That might change whenever they release their next set of vision models, since we all know that 2.5 is very impressive. So I'm guessing that they probably have some more reasoning stuff in their newer models. And Aria was very good. This is that large vision MOE that was released. The only issue with this one is that it's really hard to do offline batch processing because you don't know what experts need to be loaded. So you essentially lose the benefit of going with the MOE architecture if you're trying to do continuous batching, because you're having to load all of the experts anyways. So that was an unfortunate thing. Yeah, that's the main stuff that I had on this end.
Very cool. And I would like to highlight the caption cookbook example that was shared in the chat, that shows some of the results from the captioning. And I think it's a really good insight into the structure of the captioning pipeline, what types of things it's able to pull out. I think it's a really impressive set of work that's been done. So huge shout out to that team. Um, a couple of things that have come up that I just want to raise for discussion. Um, the first, I guess, is on review of the caption cookbook. One thing that I noticed was it is really good at capturing the, we'll say, the semantic content of the image, but I didn't see too much around the style piece. And I know that we've had some conversations around style in the past and how we were going to organize that and kind of maybe do some clustering and things like that. Do we have any thoughts about like what stylistic clustering or tags might look like for the captioning process? It's open conversation, so we don't have to have an answer. I mostly just wanted to raise it in case it's an interesting discussion topic to have.
So I guess the question, do we want to kind of have a predefined set of styles that we prompt it with? Because I mean, we can feed it, you must answer, bucket it into these valid values. That's not an issue. It's just you just have to keep it up to date, I guess. And
Yeah,
you risk,
more
yeah.
I think it's you can imagine like predefining it and it being very narrow versus like exploring the vastness of like the potential style landscape. But I do think like from a captioning perspective, I imagine that we're going to want some element. And I don't know that if this is like part of the existing pipeline or like a tangential add-on where it's like it does all the semantic content. Because I think that like if you look at the actual captions, the core content here is like really good. I wonder how we capture some of that like stylistic description. I think that's going to be like it's almost like a separate set of content that you're looking for. And I don't know that it needs to be as verbose as like the dense caption, because I think most of the time style is like relatively you kind of just want one thing. But I do wonder about that piece.
Yeah, the one element that is kind of tricky, especially with style, I found, is that once you start giving it examples, it starts deciding that your examples were a pretty good idea, regardless of what is inside of the image.
Yeah.
And so that's an area where I think something like a LoRa, LoRa training for the vision models is there's not a lot of examples of them. I think that would be a very useful area to go down and research, because if we could give it broad examples that doesn't stick it to whatever we have in the prompt, I think we could get a lot further there. And you can do switch outs of LoRa's at runtime with something like VLLM pretty easily.
So I guess the process there would be something like composing a data set of I guess a data set of various styles that have been kind of validated from a description perspective, and then using that to train a LoRa, and then using that in a separate pipeline.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Does seem interesting. Yeah, I think it's probably worthwhile to think about and consider. Only because I do know that that's going to be like an element of this that we want to think about. I also feel like very tempted to make joke about how none of the captions cite that all of these are masterpieces or the best quality. So I'll make that small joke and then we'll move on. The other thing that I'll call out is there was a paper that came out recently that was shared in the chat. I think it was earlier today in the On Topic channel of the OMI Discord. The title of the paper being "How Many Van Goghs Does It Take to Van Gogh?" I think there's an interesting lesson to be learned from that paper, primarily because it effectively cites that if you keep something, or if you keep like a concept underneath the 200 to 600 image threshold, depending on the domain and what model you're using. That effectively is kind of like it shows where you start crossing the line into it's almost like replicating certain things rather than just being inspired by it. I think ultimately that is more relevant when you are including in your caption a concept that would effectively aggregate potential infringement or likeness issues. So I don't think we intend to have some of those issues in our prompts, but it is an interesting point of consideration in our data set if we are at any point concerned that we might be including some of those or want to include some of those and want to kind of stay on the safe side of ensuring that it is a relatively clean model. We can keep it underneath that threshold and avoid too much of that becoming kind of like an issue, I think. I only bring it up because I think it is worthwhile to consider. I imagine that paper is going to be referenced in some of the existing discussions around the topic. But we don't need to have much discussion around that. It's just something I thought I'd bring up. And I would look at it if you have not, because it is interesting. Cool. Are there any open agenda items that we have that have not yet been addressed? I do see that somebody in the community cited a style safari website, which looks interesting. Which helps kind of like, it looks like it's a semantic or not a semantic, style reference kind of grouping. I'm not sure if this is, yeah, it looks like it's sref codes from Midjourney. That could be an interesting clustering exercise as well. Cool. Are there any other agenda items that folks had? Or questions from the audience that we have not yet addressed? I see some typing. I'm just going to make sure that those get through before we close out. Cool. I think this is all just chat discussion around the Style Safari website, which looks like Firefly from the community is maintaining. Definitely would be interested in partnering to figure out how to pull some of that stuff and use it for the project. I think it'd be very useful. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and call it for today. We'll get this video up. I know that last recording took a little bit to get up. This is the nature of being time constrained, but I will endeavor to get it up sooner rather than later so that it is available for anyone who wasn't able to make it today. But huge shout out to both the ML working group and the data working group. There's a lot of progress being made. Very soon here, I think the only constraint will be getting compute to train the larger model. And that is something that we continue to look for a good partner in providing. Optimistic there, especially with some of the research that we've got. I think we can demonstrate that this would be a worthwhile endeavor and ultimately keep the open model ecosystem going. Because I think we've all seen that things are progressing and that there are a lot of opportunities to continue to make the models better. I also think that a lot of the problems we're aiming to solve with the model are still open problems in a lot of ways, and that is I'm optimistic that we can address those. Cool. Well, take care, everybody. We'll talk to you next one.